Welcome back on the AM show. Now, this morning, just as we did last Friday, I'm going to be sharing with you my blunt thoughts. And it is titled, The Ghana We Want, The Ghana We Have, and the Ghana We Could Create. Now, think of the topic on which I'm dilating this morning as a reflection on Ghana today, the Ghana of our dreams, and the path to that futuristic land flowing with milk and honey. The biblical Israelites, we are told, could have moved from the wilderness to the promised land, Canaan, in some 11 to 40 days. Instead, they spent a whopping 40 years, the equivalent of 14,600 days doing so. Just as the Israelites of millennia ago, our failure to reach our own promised land, in our case, our failure to rise out of underdevelopment as a people, is self-inflicted. The Israelites, mainly because of a lack of trust in God, disobedience, grumbling, and what have you. For us, Ghanaians, owing to our sheer selfishness, military experimentation in politics, and our poor choices of leaders over the decades. Ghana now is 65 years. In another 35 years, in 2057, Amma Ghana, as we fondly call our motherland, will be celebrating her centenary anniversary. But will there be anything worth celebrating when we get there? That's the dilemma of the ordinary Ghanaian. It is the headache we all have to grapple with, especially considering the abysmal shows of our leaders in the Fourth Republic. There's a proverb by the Betty people of Cameroon that says, "You cannot run faster than your shadow." How true indeed that saying is. Since the 24th of February 1966, the very soul of Ghana has been doggedly shadowed by largely mediocre, visionless leaders who have left us a third-rate country, when in fact, we could and should have been rubbing shoulders with those in the first world. We are paupers by our own design. According to some studies, if Ghana had taken advantage of its manifold resources, we could have been a developed nation in the 90s. In fact, by 2007, when Ghana marked its first half-century, we should have long been there. Yet at the ripe old age of 65, we're still running around cap in hand, begging for alms. We are a beggarly people who cannot even fully fund our own budget and must rely on external organizations and powers. True, we are not an island, and even the United States is indebted to some extent. But it is a crying shame, our situation, especially considering the vast resources we sit on. We're very much like the proverbial prodigal son in the Bible who out of foolishness was destitute and wished that he'd be fed the pods meant for the pigs he tended, when in fact, back home, in his own father's house, even servants had more than enough to eat. That's how we are. We have it all. Yet since our national treasures can only cater for everyone's need but not everyone's greed, we remain in the quagmire of penury. And it's so pathetic considering the vast wealth we possess. So instead of possessing the nations, other nations are possessing us. But you see, it all boils down to the piss-poor leadership that I've been speaking of ad infinitum. At independence, you see, the per capita GDP of Ghana was comparable to that of a middle-income country. We had some good foreign reserves, infrastructure that was relatively well-developed, and a pretty well-educated labor force compared to most of our sub-Saharan neighbors. Our economy, which up until then had been mostly focused on extractives like gold, was substituted, at least until Nkrumah was ousted in that bestial coup, by one that was hinged on an import substitution industrialization policy. But then the overthrow of Nkrumah's government occurred, and it was all downhill from there. With Nkrumah, Ghana started off on a very good footing. But thanks to the insatiable greed of a few, we sacrificed all that and opted instead for the vampires and parasites we have had to endure ever since. Let me now take you back a notch as I reflect on some headlines from my daily graphic archives after the Nkrumah putsch. You can see right behind me. They called the Osajefo Satan. But I ask, 56 years on, do we have angels at the helm of affairs now? The chiefs, just as they are doing today, standing behind this or that party, also hailed the new regime. Ghana was said to have been freed from oppression. The truth is, we are even more oppressed today by our own kith and kin, our own brothers and sisters. We're paying some of the lowest salaries in Africa. We are witnessing one of the highest prices of fuel in Africa and experiencing one of the highest inflationary rates across our continent. On top of all that, we have the nerve to put up a national cathedral when people are starving. That is choking oppression right there. The Asante-Hene at the time called for support for the National Liberation Council. The future is bright, Lieutenant General J. Ankra said. That bright future has turned out to be a very bitter past and a dismal present. We were offered the chalice of lies and intoxicated with foolishness and self-serving interests. We drank it down to the very dregs. And for that, we're still reaping the harvest of tears for our sins, just as the rebellious Israelites did under Moses in the desert. But what we selfishly and foolishly prevented Nkrumah from doing, the prudent leaders in faraway Malaysia and South Korea, our contemporaries then, did. In making my analysis today, however, I shall be charitable and not make the comparison with South Korea because they are so far ahead of us in terms of development that it would be painful for me to take you through the facts and figures. Instead, I'd stick to the more realistic and less embarrassing comparison, Malaysia. Did you know that at the time of our independence from the British, Ghana on March the 6th, 1957, and Malaysia on August 31, 1957, both Ghana and Malaysia were at roughly the same stage of economic development? Yep. In fact, Ghana's real per capita income was slightly ahead of Malaysia's, but Malaysia took off from there. We, after Nkrumah, just saw a steady slump from which we've never really emerged. A little over 5 decades ago, you could have referred to Ghana and Malaysia as twins in terms of our economies, the level of educational penetration, human and natural resources, etc. But make that comparison today and you'd raise eyebrows. If today, Malaysia were your home country instead of Ghana, you would use 18 times more electricity owing to accessibility, live about 9 years longer, make at least 5 to 6 times more money, and be 72% less likely to be unemployed. But why did two countries so similar in their beginnings drift so far apart in real developmental terms? Sound, stable leadership and proper planning compared to our 10 changes in government and 5 military coups between 1957 and 1983. Both Ghana and Malaysia had a Vision 2020 policy. To put it bluntly, their plans materialized, ours didn't. They fizzled out. Unlike Ghana, Malaysia quickly promoted its knowledge economy, harnessing the infusion of technology in industrial policy and ICT in education. The nation built its capacity in the areas of agriculture and industry. In fact, Malaysia cleverly diversified its economy with manufacturing accounting for more than 82% of total exports in 2014. In that same year, the share of manufacturing in respect of Ghana's GDP was a shameful 5%. Malaysia, my fellow Ghanaians, did not have oil palm. The crop was first imported from Ghana, ironically, and is now their cash cow. In 2014, palm oil alone raked in $12.4 billion in foreign exchange for Malaysia, twice as much as we hope to get from the e-levy. In the same year, Malaysia accounted for 35% of total world exports of palm oil. Yet in Ghana, the crop has been neglected. Most of the land on which the crop grew has been callously exploited by unemployed youth seeking gold to make a living. Malaysia's leaders were not perfect. They had their downsides too, but they were consistent and did what was necessary to deliver the goods to their people, something none of our leaders since Nkrumah can truly boast of having done. Are you aware, my fellow Ghanaians, that Ghana has a policy document which forecasts that our country should, by 2057, have, among other things, some minimum characteristics? You can see them right there on the board. Now, if you look at point 1, and that's what I'm going to focus on, you'd see that as a country, we are projecting having a GDP of $3.4 trillion in 2057, just $400 billion shy of the current GDP of the world's 4th largest economy, and the economic powerhouse of Europe, Germany, which has a GDP of $3.8 trillion today. Now, when you contemplate Germany and look at Ghana, you'd see just how long the road is that we have to travel to get to that level. And now the big question. How do we attain those lofty heights? Surely, through setting up robust, effective, and efficient systems, having good leaders who will do the right thing, and by learning from countries that have already run the lap of moving from the third world and gone on to achieve economic development comparable to that of the first or developed world, as well as countries like Malaysia, our one-time contemporary in 1957, which, while not being developed yet, is light years ahead of us. Do we have leaders in Ghana today like those who built Malaysia from scratch? God-fearing, honest, principled, decent, disciplined, selfless, and committed to the national cause. Maybe Malaysia's leadership was not all of those things, but they still got the most important job done for Malaysia and Malaysians. Our leaders always want to show they believe in God, so they are often spotted in church and at the mosque. Yet have they been able to give us the goods God would want them to have provided for his people? Even today, after 65 years of independence, Accra still floods every year without fail, like clockwork. It rains and your heart is in your mouth because you're afraid your room may get flooded and all your stuff gets ruined, or the road to your house could be impassable, or even worse, lives could be lost. We do not have leaders, I assure you. What we have are political passers-by. They come, make the most of their positions, milking them for all they are worth, and then they are gone. Poof. It's as simple as that. But for us, the masses, this vicious cycle often means not just great suffering, but even death sometimes. One thing we have had in leadership for sure is a lot of big talkers whose only expertise is expatiating what they would do, but never really doing much. Leaders who build castles in the air when they cannot even manage the simplest projects on firm land. Leaders whose chief skill is putting personal interest over and above the public one. Leaders who always are filthily rich at the end of their tenures, while most Ghanaians, the masses, are all the poorer. Look at the next list. Our leaders, from the president to the members of the Council of State, look at the ex gratia they get. Just look at that. From the president, over 659,000. Look at all of those. Just take a look. Cabinet minister, non-MP, member Council of State. By you, how much will you get when you pension off after 25, 30, or 40 years of labor? Peanuts? But you aren't a monkey in a zoo, are you? To be handed peanuts after working your entire life. If you're fortunate enough to even get a job to do, that is. Think about that. I can tell you this for a fact. For as long as we keep electing such leaders for our country, Ghana will make no real strides, or at best, make very little progress at joining the developed group of nations. Like Professor P.L.O. Lumumba says, you cannot elect hyenas and act surprised when they feed on the sheep. Hyenas are carnivores. That is exactly what they do. They are opportunistic hunters who predate on helpless animals like sheep. Well, guess what? In this equation, our leaders tend to be the hyenas, and we, the masses, always are the sheep who docilely vote for the hyenas which continue to despoil us. Put differently, our situation is akin to that of the poor trees in the forest which kept voting for the axe to be their king because it succeeded in convincing them, since its handle was made of wood, that it was one of them. Little did the trees know that the same axe was the one hacking them into oblivion, laying them to waste. We are caught in a similar web, I tell you. But who, I ask, will be our savior? Who will be the new Nkrumah? Definitely not the breed of misleaders we have seen since the inception of the Fourth Republic until this very day. Most definitely not. But if things are to change, how shall we get there? Even now, we must push our leaders through the mechanisms that foster accountability, make more use of our court systems by suing governmental institutions and individuals that break our laws, and be more willing, regardless of the political party lenses we wear or from where we hail, to call a spade and speak truth to power. We must, as a people, compel our leaders to give us what we deserve, else we are doomed, all of us. As Patrick Wyman says, treating politicians like imaginary friends instead of public servants accountable to their constituents who have to be pressured and browbeaten into doing the right thing is one of the great pathologies of the 21st century. The word pathology, as used in this context, refers to an abnormality. It is indeed abnormal not to want to hold leadership, especially political leadership, accountable in any serious country. But that's precisely what we do here. We are experts at shielding our lying, thieving politicians. Maybe not all of them, but again, the interest of a few over that of the many. There's one stark truth you should know. Ghana, you see, is not poor. We've never been. We are, however, poorly managed, which is why we appear to be poor. We have accepted to don the cloak of poverty when in fact, we have the clothes of abundance lying at our very feet. Now, go back to what you see on the wall. We'll take a look at how it started for Ghana and how it's going. That is how it started for Ghana. Together with Malaysia, look at the GDP. Similar. Look at the GDP now in 2022. In the early 1960s, we were producing things here across the country and even neighboring West Africa Today, even toothpicks, after 5 years of 1D1F, we are nowhere near even catching up with the number of factories that Nkrumah put up, while having more modern equipment and all the logistics that you can think of. Let's move to the next slide. Look at the widening gap when it comes to GDP per capita. Look at where Malaysia is and look at where we are today. Just look at the difference. Just look at that. Let's go to the next slide. Per capita, figures in dollars. Look at where we were. 1960. Look at where we are now. These leaders are not even able to replicate, to construct, to do certain basic things that Nkrumah gave us, like the Akosombo Dam, the Tema motorway, and all of that. They are not able to do that. Not even minutely. That is why we need to do something. Despite our huge borrowing, there's nothing much to show. When you look at Malaysia and compare it to Ghana, what do you see? What do you see Ghana for? What do you see? So, this is it. The bulk of the work lies predominantly at the feet of our leaders, but also with you and with me. Let's make the right choices for the sake of Mother Ghana, for the sake of our progeny, our children, and their children after them, and many generations to come. Ama Ghana is counting on all of us. Else come the next 35 years, when Ghana is 100 years old, we shall be there again, pen in hand, begging for alms from countries who don't even have a quarter of the resources we have. We shall be plaintive, poor, sick, homeless, jobless, feckless, when in fact, we could have had it all. That Ghana flowing with milk and honey, our dream Ghana, will not come to us on a silver platter. We must love it enough to fight for it. My name is Benjamin Akakpo. I don't sugarcoat it for anybody. These are my blunt thoughts, raw, unedited, unadulterated. God bless Ghana.